I see a lot of discussions going on right now if celebrating Christmas is okay, because you do have people who are not celebrating Christmas. And I'm like, yeah, but that's okay.
Hi, everyone. This is Cindy.
Hi, this is Jana.
Welcome back to another episode of Close Encounters. We are so thrilled today. We have like a really, I guess it could be intense. I want to poke everyone today a little bit because it's about programming and about what that looks like in our world. I think, it's the 18 months, I think it's thrown us all into this vortex. And I think, I'll introduce the guests and I'll let them talk a little bit about what they're doing. So we've got Mojca, who is all the way from Slovenia, and to be honest, I don't know a lot about what's going on in Slovenia, so it's so fantastic to learn about it today. And all the way down under, we have Simon from Melbourne. And I'll let you guys just kind of introduce and just give us a little brief what you're doing, what organization you're with, and then we'll jump right in because we've got so much, I've got so much burning questions for everyone. So Mojca, why don't you get us started?
Okay, thank you for introduction. Once again, my name is Mojca Jug and I'm from Ljubljana, from Slovenia. I know everybody has troubles with pronouncing my name. It's like super typical Slovene name, so it doesn't really work internationally, but it's fine. I work in Ljubljana for an organization called Bunker, like bunker down under, even though we are on the first floor with our office. And we've been existing for like, let's say 26 years. And I've been working with Bunker since the beginning. But then I started just as a student. So basically I was hired for 3 months and then I stayed. Let's make it short. We do several things. We have a production house, like in this classical way, choosing artists, working with them, trying to tour them. We do the festival, which is our main activity. It's called Mladi Levi. This is the program from the latest of this year's edition. Is super thick. We exaggerate it a lot. It's too thick. Sorry, something fell down. And we run a venue, which is an old electricity power plant that's been transformed into a theater. And we've been running the space for 15 years now. So in the space, we program locally as we are there to serve the community of independent artists in Ljubljana. The stage is really nice. We are in super high demand. Everybody wants to work there. And we try to offer as best condition as possible. Say no rent. They have equipment for free. Box office money goes to them. But this is exactly why we were established. This is our role to help, to support, not with the money, but with know-how basically, and with the space and so on. But what we like the most doing over the years is our festival apparently. So the next year is going to be 25th edition. Wow. The last 2 editions have been really tough, 2 Corona editions, but I'm happy to report that we managed to do like this year and last year, which I think is super important. And we did not go online at all. This was one of our first decisions when we talked about it, like how we're gonna do it. If we can't do anything live, we're just not gonna do the festival. As I think the festival, as it says, it's in its name, it's festivity. I think it's about gathering people, not so much about just watching the show, but what happens before and afterwards, including the show and being influenced by show and influenced by people. International community comes in. So I would be really, really sad to call it Mladi Levi and we would be sitting like this. I mean, this is super great with you guys now, like this conversation, but not a festival. At least this is mine. So yeah, well, that's for the beginning.
Simon.
Brilliant. Hello, everyone. Simon Abrahams. I'm the creative director and CEO at Melbourne Fringe here in Melbourne, Australia, zooming in today from the unceded lands of the Great Kulin Nations. And I guess I think about my work as it's about the meeting point for me of art and civic participation. That's where my kind of artistic interests really lie. And at Melbourne Fringe, we talk about that as being about enabling cultural democracy, that idea that access to art is a human right. And so we do that through an annual festival as well, which is completely open access. That means anyone can register their event. But also, and again, we'll talk about this, also the idea that kind of open access isn't necessarily equal access. And so we think a lot about how we engage, any citizen or resident and how they can have access to the art. So we work a lot in creating installations or free works in public space, particularly kind of interested in public space and public time. We're interested in, I guess, amplifying voices from the margins. So First Nations voices, deaf, disabled, people of colour, kind of voices that we often don't hear about, our bravest artists, with the boldest ideas. They're the ones we want to kind of centre in our culture. And we also run a venue year-round as well, in a beautiful building here in Melbourne called Trades Hall, which is a beautiful historic old building, and we have a great little performing arts venue that we run in there as well. So we run our festival, our venue, and a whole series of kind of sector leadership programs that are all exploring this idea of cultural democracy and the idea of kind of civic participation, I think, in the arts. So that's really my interest. The last couple of years have been tough. Melbourne is the most lockdown city in the world. So both of our festivals this year and last year happened in lockdown. So they were digital events, although we were able to make a few things happen in COVID safe sort of ways. Home delivered art, art behind glass, art where everyone's 2.5 meters away from each other at all times. So, we've definitely been exploring that, but I'm very hopeful in 2022 that we'll go back to probably a hybrid model, but definitely to people all together, and it's our 40th festival in 2022. So my real interest is in I guess big ideas from marginalised voices or voices that we may not have heard that much about. I'm particularly interested in work, experimental contemporary live art for children, as I say, in the amateur body, which I really find fascinating in how amateurs can make extraordinary art of the highest caliber. And I guess a lot of my work explores those kind of premises as well.
Well, that is so exciting because, I think you start talking about the idea of, like cultural democracy. And then of course, like the last 18 months, the world all of a sudden has been talking about, access and equitability and of all spectrums. And this idea of equitable programming has been sort of on my mind because, when you program, it also means that then it involves the agents and managers that are representing the artists and the projects that we choose or choose not to work with, right? And so I'm also now looking at myself and say, well, am I being equitable? Am I having a roster? Like, what is the meaning of me representing? What is my goal working with these artists? And how does that translate into now talking to programmers and festivals and venues that are programming? And how are we doing it before? And how are we doing it moving forward? Because it's shifted so much. But that first shift even came when I moved to the Middle East, now living in Saudi Arabia, and I chose to forego the US North America market and said, I'm only going to focus only on the Middle East and the Pacific and Asia, right? And now once I've shifted that, already in my mind, how traditionally we are trained, we start thinking, well, I really can't work with these artists, or I can't work with this artist, or I can't. And now we're in this conversation already, even before, like already, like, how do I become you know, how does this become equitable for these artists that I would want to work with, but maybe because the market says there's no marketplace for them. And it's almost like, you know, to me, my relationship with the projects and artists that any of that I work with is, it's a very close one. I treat them all like my children. And it's like, you have all these children, how do you give equal attention? And if you're all a parent, you know, and have multiple kids, I'm a firm believer that you love all your children equally, but how you treat them is not equal, will never be equal.
That's it. It's that difference, isn't it, between equality and equity and justice.
Yes.
And you know, if you think of that as a, you know, a one-way street, you know, that treating everyone equally doesn't actually enable justice.
No,
and treating everyone equitably also, you know, even that doesn't get us to that point we want to be, where we're ripping down barriers and changing the world and actually imagining something that doesn't exist. And if we see that justice as the end goal, then you're absolutely right, Cindy, that idea of, you know, treating everyone equally is something to get us where we want to be.
Right, exactly. And I'm just curious, you know, like, how has that, has that shifted though the last 18 months for you guys, like from a programmer's, you know, seat where you're sitting, like what are you, I mean, obviously you've already pointed out about this whole hybridity, but how has that shifted and how has your audience shifted? And, you know, Mojca, you said like you didn't go virtual at all. Right. And so does that, like, is that still going to be your thought process of like, are you going to try to include some of that at all? Or
we would like the whole festival digital, I think, no. I guess at some point, as like after this year, it's almost 2 years and it's not over yet, apparently things and the world did change in many ways, in programming as well. No matter what I think digital or not, like it or not, it will change. So I guess at some point will come some probably online projects as well. But I think like since what changed for me in the terms of programming in the last 2 years would be that I not lost contact, but this not traveling and not being able to be with people at the same place physically, for me, it was very important. I mean, I lacked this. There was a big lack of that in my life. And again, not seeing live work, I suffered. Now I feel like, oh, I run there before they close my country, 2 more trips. And then, you know, I feel the urge to, I want to go out. This for me was the worst thing. And then again, doing the festival, there was not so many things produced. I mean, there were no things produced live. And since I'm interested in presenting, we are interested in presenting live works. Then there was not so many new stuff. I felt that was the problem. And I am afraid of that. If it's more lockdowns and like that in different parts of the world, that it will continue, that there will be downfall of the live production, basically. This is my fear, kind of, you know. But otherwise, in the terms of programming and like treating people equally and so on, I think everybody, we need, how we work with the artist or with a different show, you treat it individually, apparently, and then you try to provide the way, how, where, and when you present it, find the best conditions surrounding it, that the work comes out the best way possible in order to communicate with your audience and get the point out, which you felt once when you saw it a year ago at a festival, something like that. I was a bit like, I was thinking how we, like, things change, but how quickly we adjust anyway, like in general, as these animals, kind of, you know. All of a sudden, like the lockdown starts, or like there's no theater and nothing. Oh, you have this platform in Slovenia, it's called the Third Stage, and they're inviting everybody. They can record for you, they can do live shows through the internet, and they pay, and you have to pay so much money for them. With that came the new niche inside the theater for some people, how to earn the money. And it didn't upset me that people want to earn money. We all need to live out of something. But how quickly was this grand idea? Everybody wants to show the shows on platform called Third Stage. It was like, why? Why would we want to do that? You know? Then they had this brilliant idea. I mean, for some people it was nice, but for me it seemed too much and too quickly and too seriously. And this was the only thing that existed from now on. Let's stop and think if there is a way to do something like that. And then they thought they had this big idea, they will do a festival. And they just send out an open call, everybody can apply. And it didn't work. It doesn't make any sense. People are looking why to be a part of the festival. For you, talking about Fringe, that it's open, it has, that's a completely different point. How do you program and why is it so open for you? But here, it was, if you have 500, 1,000 euro, whatever, you apply and you are a part of a festival. And it didn't, festival, I think, needs to make sense as a whole thing, not you know, like in this, if you program like this, just offering the digital platform where you can present and call it a festival, I think this is damaging the festivals itself, the word of the festival. I don't know. I hope as well, what I was thinking, what's changed now, that this frequency of our travel just before COVID hit, you know, we were like, it's almost like on the verge of hysteria to go blah, 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 everywhere. That was kind of good to stop for a while. And I think now when I travel, I think more about, I try to stay more days maybe as well, not just go for one show anymore. Yeah. And I think like what we are thinking about our festival for next year and so on, like to work with artists more in the long term. I mean, even before COVID, we were thinking about it, not to have them just in and out, you know. As we produce companies as well, you have this experience going on the tour, and then you see a black box, you meet all the technicians, cleaning lady, you see the next bar, and then you perform and you go home. And this is not an experience you have. There's no connection with local, with nobody. And I think this is not sad, this is bad, actually. We need to think differently. And in the terms of traveling less, being more green, I mean, bring people over for a longer time, do something with local community, try to find the issues and where it scratches to help there to, to do something. I think that this is how we will try to do it in the future. Maybe to have less artists and keep them longer, and then maybe even present 2 or 3 pieces, more like the whole person. I mean, I
have a short question. Because like when you said, I totally agree with what you say, like long-term relationship without, I have a question regarding the content. So what are you showing? Because I think actually it's a question for all of you. What do you think about the shift in the audience? Do they expect different things than 18 months ago? I mean, expect is a very strong word, because, you know, I mean, not that we have to fulfill what someone or one person or one group is expecting, but do you feel like that the audience is looking for, or is actually asking for different content within festivals, within theaters, within the programming?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've definitely seen a really fascinating shift towards the local, where, you know, historically, I think people have very much been like, you know, I want to see what's happening all over the world. There's really been a sense now that people, for this moment in time, want to see an investment in local artists, which is really interesting. And I certainly think that will stay. For us too, there is definitely a shift, you know, which I consider a really positive one, towards this idea of art and public space. And I think people are interested in community engagement, in civic participation, in activating their local communities. And as you say, that idea of this kind of fly-in, fly-out shows that don't necessarily have roots, they just come in, do something and go somewhere else. Yeah. I think, I'm not saying they won't happen anymore, but I think audiences are not expecting that in the same way. They're expecting there to be a connection locally, to have a deeper resonance, to have perhaps some kind of community engagement process. And you know, I think because we have had lots of online work, and I absolutely agree that it's got to be considered as a whole, but we've seen so many artists start to do really interesting work in an online space, not just broadcasting their work, but, you know, work that really engages with the form. Our audiences are starting to want that. And the feedback we're getting very strongly is you have to keep doing digital. It's really accessible for so many people with disabilities, or internationally, or they can engage in a different way. And likewise, we can engage with international artists without them having to fly in. We can beam them in, or they can engage digitally, or, you know, that idea of touring the concept of a work, perhaps, that is created or recreated by a local team. And we're seeing kind of funding bodies doing that differently. So we're working with Theatre Replacement, who are a Canadian company, for example, and normally the funding they would get from the Canadian government would be to fly those artists to Australia, but instead the Canadian government's investment is actually going to pay Australian artists to recreate the work locally. Nice. So rather than that money going on airfares, it's still paying the Canadian artists, but that airfare money is basically being paid, like an artist is being paid with that wage, which to me is just a better outcome in every possible way. Better for the environment, better for, you know, artists, you know, wage earnings, and better for the work to kind of engage and evolve and do different things as well. So I think we're going to see our audiences wanting all of those things, whether they want work that is, you know, pure escapism, you know, or what we see thematically. I think, you know, perhaps in the short term, certainly here in Australia, our audiences want something light, but I think things will start to snap back pretty quickly, and we'll see people, you know, want to engage in deep and difficult work really soon as well.
Yeah. I just want to add something because I'm a big fan of the digital. I don't think it's either or, it's either live or digital. I think at one point after COVID, like I'm always talking after COVID now, it will be both. Yeah. But for example, and just because like my mom, like I'm just grabbing a very, very popular topic, which is Travis Scott at what was the game? He was in this game. He was part of this
Fortnite.
Fortnite. Yeah. So this was huge for everyone who was gaming already. Then it, you know, it actually went out of the gaming world. So I watched it. I made a Twitch account just to watch that concert. So I became part of it. But my mom, she heard about it, and she's 80, and she Twitch for her is like, oh my God, Travis. But she could never watch it because she was not able to download Twitch on her phone. It was too complicated, so it left her out. She was not part of that audience. So my question is, what does that say about equitability? You know, is that because she will not watch this unless I take my phone to her house and I show it. I did. And she loved it. But then she said, oh, that's too much for me. It's too much happening. And I was like, yeah, anyways, but you know, I feel like, is it possible to create this form of equitability, or is it
experience? Because the same thing with Fortnite. My son's 11. He was like telling me, I've got this concert going on. I was like, what? He's like, I need to watch it. I was like, okay, you're not going anywhere. I guess you can go. Right. But like in reality, he would not be of age to be able to go see this concert. But then, right, like if you think about it, and then, you know, there's so many places around the world, theaters have age restrictions unless it's coined specifically a family programming or children's show. And I want to get your thoughts on that too, because there's so many places that comes up with this rule. And especially now here in the Middle East, like they're just culture for them. Like access means I want to get what kind of show. To them, their process is what kind of performance am I going to put into this theater that is going to attract as many people as possible. And because they have absolutely no experience in cultural activities, they're all going to go with the popular vote, right? Like whatever is the biggest name. And so now we're now leaning towards the more commercial projects. And so now there's a fight between commercialism and cultural projects. And it's very visible, right? And they say, well, we got to bring in the big names to get them into the theater first before we can start going like moving down, right? And then when you hear something like this, you're just like, oh. But like going back, like with my son, he was like, he literally with the Fortnite, he's on his console. He has to like his little character, whatever avatar he is, he has to like run to the concert. It was crazy. It was wild, crazy. Huh? It's completely wild.
I think these are those questions of digital accessibility. And it creates access for some people, you know, for disabled people or people who are in different places. Regional, I mean, Australia is a huge country that has regional and remote audiences. So, you know, it creates accessibility. But Jana, as you say, to assume that everyone has access to a computer, to the internet, that has the capacity to use it, that obviously is not true either. So, you know, digital accessibility is a thing as well. So it increases accessibility for some people, but it creates new barriers for others as well. And I think the idea that, like, obviously, you know, it does help democratize what it is that we do, but you're absolutely right. It puts up new barriers to different audiences as well. And I think, Cindy, going back to your point at the start, that's what we have to consider in our journey towards cultural justice. If we're thinking about how we want people to access the work, we've got to not just go, well, everyone can just log on and sort it out for themselves.
Yeah.
We've got to be thinking about that every step of the way and actively kind of intervening in that work to get the outcome that, you know, that the people deserve.
Right, right. I mean, and
But
what
I
is
have
it
to
like,
be honest-
you know, yeah, like, and again, like just thinking about, like, we've seen so many, you know, like we've traveled around the world, we've, you know, like being in the US, then, you know, like depending on where you are only allowed access to certain types of artists from certain countries, because again, now this is now going back to politics and resources and funding of how these artists can travel internationally and how easily and flowing they can cross the borders. Like, to be honest, I haven't really seen companies from Slovenia. Like, I don't know what companies are from Slovenia, yet I know so many companies from Australia, from New Zealand, and from all these other countries. I mean, like, I was in, you know, I didn't even know like about the Georgian theater scene until I was in Georgia and I got to see their theater. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Why have I not seen this? You know? And I guess you know, like the idea of this word equitability, right? Like, I don't know if it's even, you know, is it a vision? Is it a reality? Is it like, and it's okay, you know, like when I talk to artists, right? Like, and this is one of those fundamental things, like when artists comes to me for representation or they want to work with me because they say, I really want to cross the pond to the other side. And I say, you have to look at yourself first to see what kind of artist are you? You know, are you, because no one is going to be able to, not every artist is going to be able to conquer the world. There's very, very few projects that are able to conquer the world. And you have to recognize yourself as an artist. Like, are you okay? Maybe I'm only famous in this city. Maybe I'm only famous in the state of Melbourne, but that might just be okay. And you have to be an artist, be okay with that. Right? Like, just unfortunately, because of, you know, we were talking earlier, like, and Jana and I was like, it's very subjective, where it's performances it's a subjective thing. What you like, what you don't like is going to be so different than what she or he likes from the person that's sitting next to you. So, you know, how do we, maybe it's not about equitability, maybe it's not about, you know, but it's maybe about accessing. How do we focus on our community to let our community know what is out there, and working with the programmers, how can we educate the audiences? And I always feel like I also have that kind of responsibility working with my artists, you know, and that's how I choose to curate the artists that I work with, you know. I mean, like, but I, again, like, because of my taste, my like, I'm certainly not going to work with certain discipline because A, I'm not knowledgeable of it, or two, that's just not my cup of tea. But already in that, you know, in that selection, I'm already putting other people on the sideline, right?
But honestly, I want to pick up on that, and I want to pick up on something you said in the very beginning. And this is actually a question to both of you. Open access is not equal access. Yeah. I think that is a very good sentence. And my question is to both of you, maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to not be equal to everyone, because we cannot be, when it comes to booking, we cannot be equal when it comes to choosing artists or programming and so on. So what do you think? Like, maybe, so what is the goal then? Is it open, or is it equality, or is it both? And what does it mean?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. I think for me, yeah, lots of answers. The first one to me is the idea that, you know, the things I talk about, cultural democracy, equity, justice, they're impossible concepts for us to achieve. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for them. But, you know, the idea that every citizen has access to the arts, you know, I mean, it's never going to happen for all sorts of structural reasons that make it impossible to happen, even though it is a human right. I mean, it's literally there in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It talks about access to culture and the arts. So even though it's a human right, there's lots of humans on this planet that don't have access to it, you know. So the idea that we can somehow fix that, it's not going to happen. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, I guess, strive for it in our work. But I absolutely agree with you, Jana. You can only do what you can do within your sphere of influence, within your capacity, within your resources. But for me, we should absolutely be striving to kind of give everyone access. And, you know, when I say equal access and open access are different things, I mean also the idea of open access. And you see this in something like the Edinburgh Festival, Edinburgh Fringe, you know, you see the kind of commercial realities of that. It's partly what Cindy's talking about. Yeah. The kind of commercial things rise to the top when it's just left to the pure market forces, as opposed to a kind of curatorial or equitable intervention that comes in to say, no, this needs to be profiled, or this needs to be amplified, or this needs my support to shepherd it through, because it can't do it on its own. And it's important for this reason, which could be an artistic reason, it could be a cultural reason, it could be, you know, audience development. There's all sorts of reasons why, you know, without even getting into some of those kind of bigger justice questions, all sorts of things why we don't just leave things to the market to solve, because the market forces will fail the art of it ultimately in the end. Right. And so we need to kind of intervene in that process. And I guess that's what I mean of going, we can't just, you know, give up on the fight for equity and justice, even though it's never going to be literally achieved, not in our lifetimes, you know, and I would argue probably ever. I still think we've got to fight for it, and we've got to kind of work towards, you know, bit by bit, making it happen.
Yeah, I agree with you completely what you said, and I'm thinking like, yeah, we cannot save everybody in that sense. So we should just be like, try to be open and equal, and try to recognize your own niche where you are good at what you do. And inside of that, try to reach as many people, be as open as possible and as equal as possible. And it will never apply to the whole population, of course, because there's only a pool of people who are interested in contemporary performing arts, exactly what we are doing, or where we find our strength, where we can help. So I think that it's, yeah, if everybody works in their own, like in your own little garden, but still try, you know, as they say, think globally, but work locally in that sense, kind of. But I think we should just never forget about it. We should constantly think about when we program, like who is it for, or is it accessible to everybody, but at the same time be realistic. Yeah, and we don't have to fulfill everybody's dream. It's not for everybody, for your own, where you think your strength is. And I think that you need to be aware of that when you are doing program. Yeah, and you need to recognize your own strength, where you can be helpful and open to the others. Because otherwise, I think you may, you should stick with what you know, how. Like, where is your strength?
I think this is a really, really good point, to stick with what you know, because, you know, for me, I honestly, like, I was a dancer, so I do know dance, but opera, okay, the opera, I can do the magic flute and stuff, but I'm not really, like, if someone would ask me to do a programming, like a whole season on an opera, but I would be like, not for me, because I can only come up with the, you know, very commercial, what everyone knows, because I could not even say, I mean, I can hear if a singer is good or bad, but I have no idea really. But I can tell you if a dance piece is good or bad, or this is my specialty. So I totally agree with what you say. And then also what Cindy said earlier, that of course we will always be subjective. I will always, I mean, I can either choose something I like, or I can go for the opposite and say, I will choose something I don't like. But then again, it's subjective, because I would say, I choose it because I don't, but because I want to provoke something, or I want to, I mean, that could be a reason to program something, or to make a choice, to say, oh, it's like a piece of art. It's not necessarily beautiful or nice, but it does something. So, but I think this is a very good point. It's, I mean, I have one more question, because in Germany, we have this whole shift towards everyone is trying to be so Vogue. We say Vogue here because, all of a sudden it's about being, everyone is pro everyone. So everyone is trying to please everyone, and it's not working. Honestly, you have to make it, like Christmas is coming. And I see a lot of discussions going on right now if celebrating Christmas is okay, because you do have people who are not celebrating Christmas. And I'm like, yeah, but that's okay. I mean, if I go to, I don't know where they're not, I was in Thailand when I was 10, so no one was celebrating Christmas and I was fine. I mean, I knew I am in a country where Christmas is just not, it's just not happening. But I mean, I was thinking yesterday, so what does that do to the programming, to the theater programming? Isn't that a shift as well, that all of a sudden everything has to be so equal? And so, I don't know, it's really hard to provoke in a way, because I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm in this thinking process right now, because I feel like talking freely and starting discussions with saying, oh, I don't understand why I have to say this and cannot say that, is already difficult.
I think in many ways, it's the question of our time, and this idea of kind of freedom of expression versus, the idea of kind of cultural safety and ensuring that, everyone has the kind of right to express themselves, but also that idea that I guess no freedom is absolute, or without consequence. And so I talk about that a lot, of going like, yes, you've got the right to express yourself, but you've absolutely got to understand that if you say something that is offensive, not offensive to somebody, but offensive to kind of groups of people based on race, gender, ability, whatever, that there are consequences that come with that. And part of our job, I think, in the arts, we have these two dueling jobs, I think, which are about creating empathy, because I think that's what art does, but also expression, free expression. And so those two things, they can come into conflict with each other. And for me, I guess I think, well, on the one hand, not everything deserves a platform. So I'm not saying it should be illegal, but we can choose not to program something in our festival if we believe, like it doesn't, that particular viewpoint gets plenty of air in the media and in other places. I want to platform these voices that, again, are building a kind of different kind of world. But at the same time, I think offensiveness can't be the guide to what is and isn't seen. We've seen that over, thousands of years where, religious fundamentalists and other people have used offensiveness to shut down queer voices and other minority women and other minority voices of what is and isn't offensive. The kind of mainstream or powerful people kind of can't make the decision about what is and isn't offensive, because what that does is shut down important voices that we need to hear. But at the same time, for me, that's the thing for me. It is about marginalised voices and making sure they're amplified, and kind of going that same question, I think, of that, how do we play that idea of freedom of expression and cultural safety and people's right to have both of those things, and our aim to build empathy in the world that I think ultimately, surely is why we're here in the arts, is to kind of build a world where we feel something and see something and experience something that's not our own.
Right. And, that actually, that takes me to this question of also now, because every region, like Australia is very open. Australia is very, very diverse, ethnically. It's a very diverse country, just like the US. And so in the US, of course, it's like, again, we need to now have, we have to show all sorts of fabrics of cultural performances on stage, representing the different fabrics of the makeup of what the United States look like. And to me, then you create this, historically, you have now presenters and programmers that are now programming, their structure now looks like, we have a Latin program, we have an African-American program, we have an Asian program. And then, so like throughout the holidays, like Black History Month, now all the program will be focused on African-American stories, right? And then you've got like the Lunar New Year. Now everyone wants to do all these Chinese New Year programming. And then now all of a sudden you have Cinco de Mayo, and then now you're like all the Latin programming. And then, I'm sure that doesn't look like that in Slovenia, right? And
No. No.
We all look the same. Everybody looks like me.
Exactly.
More or less, it's only 2 million of us. There's we have diversity, but for you it would be ridiculous because we can count.
Exactly. So that, and I think that's
like when I was born in the small city where I was born, and I lived until I was 18. There were it's a very small town, and they had, I think, there were like maybe like 3 African people live there. And they were, in the 80s, there was a big exchange between African countries, of students in African countries would come to study to Yugoslavia because of this unallied that Tito established, with India and African countries, and Yugoslavia was a part of it. So there was a lot of exchange. So from that time, we have a couple of people who are mixed race, but like I tell you 3, and we all liked them a lot, and we knew them by the name. One was veterinarian, one was a doctor, and the other one was I don't know what. So it's very different. But of course, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We have problems on different levels, as they are other people. There is a lot of people from the region and the countries of ex-Yugoslavia, like in Slovenia particularly. They lived here before, or they came afterwards to find better life, basically, like if you're from Bosnia, or like things that were really hard and tough. So in that sense, we don't, not that we don't care. I mean, we program what we think it's relevant. And in this, I don't think, because this is not, of course we think about it, we are aware of it, but it's not that it will be like a big issue for us, and we would feel the need, we need to take this performance of this community. And I really dislike that kind of thinking. Like I would never want to work for a festival that's dedicated only to, let's say, inside Slovenia, we would do the festival of gypsies only. We need to find a performance done by gypsies that's good enough for us. I mean, that's on that level that goes into your main program. And that's it. That for me would be the ultimate idea. Like, not like, once I remember I went to Greece to this project called Unlimited Access, and it was a dance festival for people with disabilities, and it was EU funded and blah blah blah. It was all well and fun, and I was thinking, the problem is that there are the minority and they are pushed on the side, and organizing festival just with them, for them, and a little bit for us, it's pushing all of us even further into the corner. All those performances should find a place in all the different European festivals. They should find a place, not because they're disabled people performing, but because of what is their point, what they're telling us, what is their perspective, not because I can't walk, like,
well, honestly,
you know what I mean? This totally. For me would be ultimative, but this, I don't know it will ever happen. Maybe in Slovenia easier because it's smaller, it's with less, I don't imagine, I don't know.
This is a very important topic, because I had a company, I was working, I created a small company for disabled people, and most of them were mentally disabled, so it was like Down syndrome and stuff. The thing is, our goal, it was with dance and music, always was that every performance, small or bigger, had to work, not because the people were disabled.
Exactly. Not because they're disabled. That away.
If you see it, I saw a dance piece years ago and I hated it. And honestly, standing ovations afterwards. And I thought, oh, the only reason why everyone is standing up, because you have someone in a wheelchair on the stage. And that is not, because that is reducing that person to being a person in a wheelchair. And this is exactly what was not supposed to happen.
I mean, it's such a complex question. There's a really famous Australian disability activist. Her name was Stella Young, and she talked about what she called inspiration porn, which was that idea that able-bodied people will often go, you're so inspiring, and she'd sort of say, what all I did was get out of bed and brush my teeth. Like, why is that inspiring? My life is not inspiring. I'm just living my life, and because I'm a wheelchair user doesn't necessarily make me inspiring to you. But I think so. There's an element of that absolutely is pretty complex. I think the question of again, the kind of ghettoization of particular kind of communities, it's a really vexed question, because in the one hand, yes, you say it should be centralised and it should be put into every festival program, but number one, it doesn't happen. And so it's easy to say, well, it just shouldn't, it's part of a process that, as a culture, we haven't yet achieved. And secondly, that those kind of festivals and moments and gatherings, they're about community building as well. And they are about kind of creating moments of cultural safety and kind of opportunities for conversation amongst particular communities, perhaps that isn't going to happen when things are kind of all in together. And we definitely see that, in context here in Australia, for example, around First Nations spaces and programs. They and it's true in disability cultures as well, they've got to be led by those communities and not led by those in the kind of cultural mainstream. And so for me, the idea that those two things can live side by side, that there are these opportunities for different groups to create festivals and moments and things that are led by those communities that have impact and resonance there. But also, of course, that big mainstream festivals need to represent our populations and need to include kind of diverse outputs. To me, those two things kind of should exist side by side, and it's not a kind of either or equation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the gripe a lot of times I have is that you want to do it, and you say it's true, it's to be led by these groups, but also from the bigger scale level, it's like, how do you do it in a way that's in an authentic, it's an organic experience, right? Whereas it's not just thrown together because you're trying to serve a marketing campaign. Like, it's not for a marketing campaign. It has to make sense. When these, when presenters, when I talk to, when I used to be when I was working with these US presenters and festivals, they say, well, it's focused on this community. And I'm thinking, are these really community? Do you think that the community are not, like, why are you not engaging them in a way that are also letting them have access or allowing them to see different things other than their own work? Like, I'm sure they know their work, right? But then why are you only interested in showing them work by their own people? Like, I mean, it's just, it makes, that's very frustrating for me sometimes, you know what I'm saying? And it's all led by this. And I'm not sure how, is that serving the audiences? Are we disservicing them by just saying, okay, I'm only programming this because it fits your racial profile?
Any kind of tick box programming, is a bad outcome. It's tokenism, and it's not a good outcome. And
then there's so many of that, though, and that's
there's so much of that.
I mean, and it's like, that's just something that I'm like, have we gone beyond that now? Like, after 18 months, like, have we? And does it mean that maybe we have to collectively work even closer, like from management, and artist side? How do we come up collectively? Should that shift? Do we shift our, how can our conversations, because I always think of this as the triangle, right? Like, I always say, like, the programmers, the artists, the artist managers, and the artists, it's a inseparable link, it's this triangle that is not going to come out. All three parties have to be involved, but oftentimes it's almost just a two-way, or the artist gets left out of the conversation, or it's just the artists and the programmers, but then something gets lost in translation too. And I do feel like it's like this pyramid, this triangle that is so crucial. And I feel like we're at this point, at this cusp, that this link has to be even stronger to really make even a little bit more of a change of how our engagement with the artist, with the community, and just like what we talked about earlier, I have had conversations with some artists and they were like, it was so great. Some of them, of course, because they, maybe financially they were able to not be able to work, but then they had this moment to just kind of rethink and said, you know what, I think after this, I'm going to be more selective of how I tour now internationally. Even they're saying that to me. Like what we talk about, we mentioned this previously, like this is a marathon. It became this marathon of touring. Like all we saw, even when I go on the road with my artists, I don't see the city. I see the theater, I see the backstage, and I see the hotel. And then when you're done, you're on to your next destination. And so,
Totally.
And an artist completely said this to me, and it's like, yeah, I constantly do this. It's like this marathon of like city after city, and then they wake up and they don't know where they are, and they have absolute no idea who they, it's that lack of engagement, really. There's that intimacy is no longer there.
That's it. That goes back to that first point, I think, that we're making. That, to me, it's not a triangle because there's so many other, communities and audiences. And then ultimately, of course, none of that can happen without philanthropists and governments and so many other things that enable it to happen. But for me, you've got to at least have community and an audience in there, because we can't create our work if we're not engaged with them. We can't successfully create our work if we're not deeply engaged with those who are consuming it. Otherwise, we're just making work, for ourselves. And what's the point? For me, if we're trying to affect any kind of change, people have got to come and they've got to understand it and kind of engage with it.
I agree with that point very much. And I have to say, what I always liked and what is coming back here, I don't know, is for example, if they have a ballet, if they're programming, they have this conversation between the choreographer and the audience, like small groups of people where they sit down, they can ask questions, and the choreographer is answering the questions. So I don't know, whatever. It's not necessarily Swan Lake or Nutcracker, but it's maybe something more abstract. So the thing is, like, dance in Germany is it's not very popular art. It's still, from all the art forms, it's the one where you have a rather older audience or a very young audience of, the little girls who want to be a ballerina one day. So, but the thing is, like, I feel like this kind of connecting the artist, which is the choreographer, or even the dancers, they do open training on stage, and the audience. So this is because there is a gap in between those two. They don't really connect with each other, but this way people do start to understand more about dance, which forces, like, so friend of mine went there, she had nothing to do with dance, and now she takes all her friends for the next show. So it already became, from one person it's up to 10, and if, I don't know, 50 people do the same thing, you already have like 500 people sitting there. At the same time, it's about money because the tickets are really expensive. So what the Deutsche Oper did is, like, they said, okay, everyone underneath 30, we sell tickets for a cinema prize. I told that to Cindy yesterday. They use the word cinema, which is very smart marketing wise, because they connect cinema entertainment with ballet entertainment, and it's affordable for everyone. So you can choose between James Bond and ballet. Well, a lot of people still choose Bond, obviously. I would.
I would choose
I'm a Bond fan. I would totally choose Bond. But it puts it down on a more, it's not that far away anymore. It's not this like art form which is somewhere in the space. It becomes more normal and accessible. And I think I thought that was a very smart move. And also the marketing thing saying cinema prize. But I think that's also something to program kind of, audience meets the artist, or my mom always loved to come to see a rehearsal. She said she loves the rehearsal more than the final performance because she loves to see the process, how something develops. And I thought, oh, interesting. Maybe that could be something that you do, like an open rehearsal and invite and sell, well, not full price tickets, but
We've
I think we need your
tried
mom
all
as a
these.
guest on this podcast.
Sorry?
I think we need your mom as a guest on
She
this.
should come.
Yeah, to tell us how to make it better for her,
You've got
easier.
things to say,
Well,
I
what
can
you've
tell.
mentioned, all these things now, we've tried many of them. When we got the venue first, we were like, oh, this is like a spaceship landed in the neighborhood. Nobody knows who they are, what they do. They don't like you. They didn't like us, the neighbors. Then we had this brilliant idea to have open rehearsals and to ask them to come in for free. And it doesn't work. It doesn't really work. It's not all about the money. It's about the interest or knowing your neighbor. So they didn't come. It was like, no, that idea doesn't work. And then we did it really seriously. We engaged an anthropologist and we did a serious survey. We gathered different groups of people, age, education, blah, blah, the way it's done. In our neighborhood where we are based, it's in the center, but it's more sleeping community. It's called, the quarter is called Tabor. So we did this survey and we came up with things what people are lacking in the neighborhood, because we were trying to see if there are things where we as a cultural organization or as individuals can help. And it turned out beautifully. It was like, it's very, very simple. It's almost nothing artistic about it anymore, but it's so much for the community or for the well-being of everybody, or for us feeling good, giving something to the community. It turned out that they are lacking public spaces that are not connected to consumership. Because basically almost wherever you sit, you have to drink some. You can't sit in a cafe without drinking, but then you need a park where you can do that. It's very simple. We cleaned the park ourselves together with neighbors physically. Went there, painted the benches, blah, blah, blah. Then they said that they would want more children's playgrounds in the neighborhood. So we were able to organize that. In a year, 2 of them were built through another artistic project we did through Mladi Levi. So we tried this, how to attract people. And now where we are at this point, after 15 years, they know exactly who we are. They like us, but that still doesn't mean that they come to see the performances. But we invite them like that, but it's okay. Maybe it's not, maybe they want to go to Spaß Theater, like this fun theater, with the comedies. It's fine as well, as long as they kind of understand what we do and we are here. And but I have to mention that one positive thing that we have is, like, we don't, of course everybody depends on money, but in the frame of the festival, for example, we give all the tickets for free. We don't charge anything for the festival. So we ask people just for voluntary contributions. And this is pure luxury that we are able to do that, because box office money in our festival budget, it's a very small portion. And for us, this is super important that we are able to offer the festival for free. That's one of the points of accessibility as well. If you don't have money, we asked them for voluntary contributions, and it turned out that at the end of the day, after 10 days, the amount is almost the same. Either if we would sell the tickets, our venues are not so huge. We have a lot of friends. My friends, I'm thinking like, okay, my friends are not going to pay for the ticket. I'm going to give them ticket for free. Now they say, no, we want to contribute, in that sense. So at one point, it didn't make sense anymore to charge for the tickets. And now it has been going on at least for 6 years. We have it like that. Oh, wow. And it's very, very nice. The only problem here that you face sometimes is that like people make a reservation and they don't show up. But then there's always somebody who didn't make a reservation and then they come. I think that's very nice. And as well, we like in the how and what we do in the venue, when we program the venue or we agree with local artists to do it, they can set up the price. But when we started, for us, it was exactly, we shouldn't go above the cinema. We should go maybe €1 lower. We always thought about the price ticket of the cinema. So we would level it with that. and then the box office money goes to the company at all. So we have no interest in that. I mean, some people would say, oh, 15 euros. Saying, no, make it 5, but make it 5 for everybody. If you have 15, you sell 3 tickets and then you have 100 people on your guest list. It doesn't make sense. Ask your friends to give 5 euro and then 100 people give 5 euro. It will be a bit better. But we don't enforce that. It's their money. They can decide what they want to do. But I think that's very... Yeah, that's a luxury, you know, that you don't have to. So you're never in a position to compromise your decision, because you need to be successful and have full box, and you need to make something super popular. It doesn't come to that. And this is beautiful that you don't have to do these kind of decisions, I think.
Free box office is a wonderful idea. We probably don't have that luxury, but one thing we did this year, which is, you know, trying to achieve a similar thing, I think, was we had our ticket price, but then we had 2 other ticket prices. One was what we called our overflowing ticket price, which basically said to audiences, our art, if you can pay extra, all of that money will go to the artists. So if you've got capacity, it's like, you know, if you can pay more, please do. Get exactly the same, but the money goes to the artist. And again, we're amazed at how many people did that. And then we did the opposite of that, which was what we called our less than full price, which basically said, we know that some people can't afford it, you know, and there's concession prices and things, but we're seeing people who perhaps they're not a student, they're not whatever, but they still can't afford it. We had a cheaper price, again, no questions asked. So just saying an honesty system that basically just said, if you can pay more, please do. Here's the standard price, and if you can't afford it, here's a cheaper price. And we were amazed at, you know, the number of people that took the more expensive option was really significant, well and truly outsold those who you know, paid for the cheaper option, and obviously everything ended up well and truly on top. So I think, you know, you can kind of create accessibility and opportunities for artists in really simple ways as well, you know, that whether it's for free, as you can do there, which I love, or, you know, kind of setting equitable, you know, or accessible ticketing prices as well.
Right. Well, ticketing is like a science in itself, right? And now, like, I mean, I don't ever have to, you know, from my side, I don't have to think about that, but it is a science, and it does impact, like, it impacts what are the artists that I am able to successfully get programmed into any theaters because of, you know, and I mean, I'm so torn about this free ticketing, right? And I guess it really all depends on communities, regions, countries where you are and stuff, because there is this also, like, you know, I work really closely with China, and, you know, it becomes this thing where for a very, very long time, a lot of performances were for free, but then people start to not appreciate the performance. And so now they, you know, and this was like the first, you know, when I started entering the Chinese market in China, a lot of venues were doing it for free because they feel like this is the only way. But then the audiences become a bad habit because they don't want to, they think they can get tickets for free. So they'll wait until the very, very last minute to get tickets. And then you have all of a sudden then this no show. And then there is like, does that mean, like, you know, how does that equal less appreciation for the artist if they're not asked to pay for it? And you see, obviously, you know, very different, this free scheme reaction is so different. And I'm still struggling with it because, you know, on the commercial world, you would never, ever, ever go see Travis Scott for free. And people will fight for that $500 ticket to go see Travis Scott. So I'm always torn. Like, I'm thinking just like from this, you know, and what you just said, you know, Simon, like this idea, like so many people now, right? Like this contribution. I mean, do you think that's going to continue though? Like, do you think that ticketing model option is now going to stay with us? I'm really curious, like how.
I do, and I think even when I think about the ticketing providers that we are working with, right, you know, they've now set up into the ticketing system, you know, models that are choose your price, you know, pay what you can, pay by donation, all of those things that previously like they couldn't happen because the ticketing system couldn't cope with it. The ticketing system had to set a price and you bought it and that was it. Whereas, you know, even just basic things like that, now that kind of the world has changed as a result of the world changing, as we've said, we've got these hybrid digital models versus in-person models. That means ticketing is going to change, and the systems and processes that enable those structures have shifted. That I think means we're going to see long-term change to enable some of these things to, you know, to continue even when, you know, life is back. I don't think life's going to be back as it was. I think things are going to be different moving forward, and I'm hopeful that some of these things, you know, there's so many good things that have come out of this terrible time that I think we can hold on to. Definitely.
Well, thank you. I mean, this was such a, oh God, it was such a inspirational, you know, like it's just a thought-provoking, again, like conversation to have all these different ideas. And I always tell Jana, you know, both of us afterwards, we're like, oh my God, so many ideas now. And it was so great because, you know, you sit in your desk from one side, right? We're always on one side of the court, and having these conversations allow us to be on the other side of the court or see a little bit of what's happening on the other side of the court. And the view is so different. And those kind of like, again, like this idea of ticketing, like you encounter it, but to be having for a programmer, having to think about it or not think about it, you know, having the luxury of being able to program everything for free, you know, that's something that I don't have to think about on a daily basis, you know, except like when I'm trying to negotiate a fee for my artist, because then the programmer will tell me, well, I can't make the numbers work. You know, I got to make the numbers work. But thank you, truly.
Yes.
We started like during our last episode, kind of this little segment we wanted to ask is this underrated or overrated. Last time we talked about program notes or program books, when people go to theaters and you get a whole program of what the shows. Today I wanted to, this is something that's a very recent thing, right? Like pronouns, like everyone's starting to list their pronouns on their emails. What are you?
No, actually, I'm going to say something about it. I'm not in general.
But I'll let you say it because this is a recent thing. Like it's like all of a sudden, where did this come from? Everyone's announcing their pronouns. Like, you know, I barely know it's like my grammar is awful. So I can't even begin there, right? But go ahead, Jana. I want everyone to start on this.
I think it's great that this is an opportunity to do so. I just don't want to be forced to do so.
Yeah.
Because I like on Facebook, for example, I don't even have a relationship status. I'm very, very private with my private information. I'm totally happy. I mean, I think it's great that there is this opportunity, but I don't want to be like me personally. I choose not to do that. But because I don't even share my relationship status with everyone, like work-wise. Private is private, work is work. So if, you know, that's all and here it becomes that thing that you have to do it. And that's where I'm a bit like, it's still a choice.
It's a choice, but it's a choice because you have privilege and yes. you are able to demonstrate that choice. I think that's the point of why people share their pronouns, is because for a lot of people that's not a choice, it's not a privilege when they, you know, if they don't identify perhaps, you know, with a pronoun that they appear to have, you know, if someone identifies as transgendered or on the non-binary, and there's so much evidence that kind of shows that having the correct use of pronouns for people is so beneficial to their mental health, that for someone like me, I'm a cisgendered man, my pronouns are he and him. It's something that's clear and you know, it's a great privilege that I have, that I don't necessarily need to walk into a room and say my pronouns are he and him. That's something that people assume about me, and they're right. But for some people, that's not the case, and so they're frequently misgendered, and you know that has enormous and huge kind of mental health implications for people. So it costs me absolutely nothing to, you know, to be able to make sure that people know what pronouns I use, which is only really to make sure that I know. It's a great way to start the conversation, to know what pronouns other people use without making assumptions, because assumptions are frequently wrong and get us into trouble. So again, for me, it's about empathy and kind of showing our privilege and giving people the chance to kind of be who they are and to show respect for that. So yeah, for me, I think it's really important.
Yeah. Well, you know, in Chinese language, there's no pronouns. He or she is the same. We say the same word. It's only different if you're writing it down on text. So this is why, like, if you speak or if you communicate quite often with, you know, with like a Chinese person in English, they will oftentimes, even though they're trying to say he, they'll end up saying she, or it'll be, or vice versa. Because in our language, when we speak, there is no pronoun. So this is what I'm saying. Like, if, you know, I think there's a lot of people outside of the Western context, when they're not speaking in English, you know, like they get confused by that. Like, why are they pronouncing their pronouns when all of a sudden, you know, like we say, ta is he, she. It's the same word. That's the same word when it comes out of your mouth. It's only different when you write it in text. And so this is why I want to throw it out there.
Like, for example, we have 3 articles in German, der, die, das. So it's her, his, and it. So, you know, it could be that. It's very complicated but I think a language that never had this kind of pronouns, of course, for them, it's more difficult to include. But for us, for example, we always had der, die, like 3. Yeah. So for us, it's just, like Simon said, it's just a bit more, it becomes more like it's a possibility to pronounce yourself differently because we have the words in our language. We use them, we always use them. But yeah, of course, when you come from China, you're like, huh? What? Why?
Or I mean, or places that don't have those differentiations, because that also affects how you interact and behave with others because of your language and what you understand of the language.
I haven't thought about it a lot. And so I don't think I have a strong opinion, but I really like how Simon explained it now. It's a luxury
of course,
that you're able
Simon,
to do it.
Simon always says everything so beautifully, even his
that was I really like that. I think it's I think it's nice that people are able to express, and then it's nice for me and for them for me to address them the way they want. I think that's beautiful then. So I have nothing against it. I think it's nice that you're able to do it. So far, I have never thought about doing it for myself because I never thought in that way. I think I will not do it I don't know. But why not? If people feel different and that they want to be specific how they want to be addressed, I think that's nice.
Cool. And one last final question, and we ask this because no one can really meet. I mean, we're slowly being able to see each other now, but we always ask, I mean, you're obviously in Germany and not in Slovenia, but I mean, Simon has been in his state for like the last, 18 months, right? Forever. So the question we ask, and we're kind of taking a poll, but there's always a strong city that's been coming on top. So if you can, like, let's say now, especially for you, Simon, if you can get on a plane, where would you want to go?
Oh gosh, there's so many answers to that. I mean, in terms of places I love that I go to all the time that I want to go back to, I mean, you know, I want to be in New York City, I want to be in London, I want to be in those places that, you know, I love and I know really well and I go to all the time. Yeah. But also, I guess, it also makes me want to go to places I've never been to before. You know, I've never been to the Middle East. I've never been to Japan. There's so many places I haven't been to that I also go, gosh, I want to get on a plane to Tokyo and experience something I've never experienced before. I've never been to Africa's whole continent I've never been to. So I also kind of go, you know, I want to go somewhere I've never been as well. But of course, soon we'll be able to do all of those things, I hope, and I'll be able to visit a new continent and a new city and go back to the cities I love as well really soon.
And Mojca, what about you?
I'm in Germany now. It's not the top, like ranking on the first 5 in my list, Munich, but it's nice to be here. If I could go, like there is one place that I really want to go, and I will actually do it the end of the month, which is Reykjavik in Iceland. I'm going to Lokal Festival, and this is something that I really wanted to do for a very long time, and now everything clicked together, so I'm able to go. But otherwise, yeah, I would go to New York. I really like New York. Like I like Melbourne a lot, or many other places in Australia. I visited 3 times, and it feels for me, it's like it's something so bizarre. I feel so good there. Like I've been there before in my previous life, probably. No, Melbourne especially, I like a lot.
Have to come for the Melbourne Fringe, October 2022.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then, but so far, Ljubljana is quite nice. I mean, I'm happy that I live in Ljubljana. I think the quality of life is nice. It's a good base to travel. Small country, a lot of green. I think we still have benefits of this kind of nice, small European green country. So it's not that bad to be in Ljubljana as well.
Well, New York has been coming out on top of the list for every of our guests.
I don't know. It's so funny. Why? I mean, it's like, I don't know.
I mean, I love New York because I'm from New York. So it's like, for me, that's going home to see my family. And so, but I guess Jana's internet is really not working well for her, but she cut out. But I just want to say thank you. It's been so fabulous, to chat with you guys. It's been so fun. Thank you all. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. And we will all see you next time on our next episode. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao. Good luck. Ciao.
Bye.